Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Eats Books, and I'm here today to bring you my favorite adult books of 2016. I had such a great reading year. It was just fantastic. I do have a young adults video coming directly after this, so if you don't see any of those books on here, it's not because I discounted them, they're just getting their own separate video. But I have so many books to get through, so let's get started. These are in no particular order, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. The first one is A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. I read this book just recently. The writing style is what made me fall in love with it. I absolutely enjoyed it. His character development was so great. Owen Meany is probably one of my favorite characters of all time now. He's just bigger than life. I can't get him out of my head. I've read this a couple of weeks ago and he's just stuck in there. He's cemented in there. So definitely one of my favorite books of 2016. The next author was a new to me author this year, and these were the two books that I read by her, and I was blown away each time. The first one I read was The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty, and then the second one I read was Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, and they were just fantastic. They surprised me. The ending surprised me, which is very, very hard to do, and when that happened, I was just kind of taken aback because I was like, no one surprises me, but she sure did. So I really enjoyed these. Definitely two of my favorite books. Another one of my favorite books this year was Rules of the Wild by Francesca Marciano. This was about a woman in Africa who is going through relationship problems, and it was just fantastic. The writing about the atmosphere and their setting, I felt like I was in Africa. I've never been there, but I felt like I was. It was so good, and this was a very underrated book on Goodreads. There was not that many. I think there was only like 100 and something ratings. I'm not even sure if that's accurate, but it was a very small amount. So when I picked this up, I wasn't expecting much, but I was really blown away. I really enjoyed it. It's not the most uplifting novel, but it is definitely one that you can't put down because you want to see what happens to this person. So really, really enjoyed it. Another of my top picks this year was Alice by Christina Henry. I read this for Spookathon this year, and it was just fantastic. It was such a unique take on Alice in Wonderland. Very dark, very twisted, very adult take on Alice in Wonderland, but it was so good I couldn't pass up including it in this list. Another one of my favorite books this year is one that I've seen on a lot of people's worst list over the last few years, and that is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is the movie cover, and I'm never big on movie covers, but this one really grabbed my attention. I actually loved it. I tried to watch the movie, did not enjoy it as much. This is just a fantastic story about this boy named Oscar who lost his father on 9/11, and he is trying to figure out where this key belongs to that he has found in his father's possession, in his father's things, I mean, and it's just his journey and trying to grieve and trying to deal with it, and he's not your average 9-year-old anyway, so it's just fantastic. I really loved the writing. It was different, it was unique, and I know a lot of people don't like child narrators, but I actually did not mind it. I really enjoyed it, so I recommend this book. It was very emotional for me. I cried more than once, so please, if you have not read it, at least give it a try. The next book was actually a nonfiction book that I read this year, and that was Dead Mountain by Donnie Ecker. This is the true, untold story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. This is one of the very few that I read this year, and it was fantastic. It was engrossing and fast-paced, and I wanted to know what happens, and I couldn't put it down. So this was probably my highest rated nonfiction this year. I only read a few, but yeah, I had to include this on this list because I absolutely loved it. I'm recommending it to every single person that I know. The next book was a reread for me, and it actually became one of my favorite books from this author, and that is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So sorry for the glare. My shades aren't keeping the sun out. The sun is at a weird angle right now. But anyway, this book was so good the second time around reading it. I absolutely adored it. It just was it was more than I remembered it being, and I can't wait to reread it again next year because I think this is now going to be my Halloween go-to read. So if you have not read Pet Sematary and you're up for like a horror type read, but it's more of a subtle horror, it's not like over the top scary, definitely give this one a try. The next book I just finished this past week, and that is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This was getting in just under the wire for 2016, but I'm so glad that I read it this year. It was fantastic. I had been wanting to read it for so long, and her writing was beautiful. The story was great. I just really enjoyed it, so give it a shot if you are into like family saga type tales. This is definitely one of those that keeps you really interested. It has like mystery elements to it as well, so if you're in that mood, it's a great winter read. I also, like I said, had a few books that I don't physically own, and I just wanted to run down the list and give those to you because some of them were my favorite books of the year. The first one being Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I absolutely adored that book. Just the sheer brilliance of the way that she wrote it, just the formatting, how she came up with that idea. It was fantastic, and the writing was great. I fell in love with these characters in such a short period of time. You'll understand what I mean when you actually read it, because each character, you don't have much time with them, but the time you do have packs a serious punch. The next one that I wanted to recommend was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. That one just tore my insides apart. I was an emotional wreck for a day reading that book. I mean, I read it literally in a day. It was so good. It is a World War II story. It just, World War II and me, I cry all the time with those types of books. And if I don't cry, it's an anomaly. I don't cry easily for many books, but World War II's just, they always seem to get me because though the stories themselves may not be true, the incident was definitely a true story, and I just can never imagine what these people went through. So that is one, if you're looking for a World War II book, to definitely give a try. Another book that I read and I loved was This Is Where I Leave You by Jonathan Troper. He has a way of making you feel like you're a fly on the wall in this book. This is so dysfunctional. All these characters are very dysfunctional, and they're entertaining, and I found the main character quite funny, and I just loved it. I had the book and I gave it away. I don't know why I did, because it was one of my favorite books, but I thought, oh, I'm not going to reread this, because I never was a person who reread books, but I've now become a person that rereads books. So I wish I never gave it away, but I will definitely be on the lookout for another copy when I go to my library sales this year. Another one that I have that my daughter has the copy of, I don't know where it is, so I couldn't have it here for this video, was Sarah's Key by Tatiana de Rosnay. It was another World War II story that just ripped me apart emotionally. I couldn't get past it. I have not forgotten it, and I read it more towards the beginning of this year. It was so good. So again, if you're in the mood for a World War II story, that is definitely one to check out. Another book that I read this year that I got from the library was Ruby by Cynthia Bond. That book, at the time when I was reading it, I thought was really good. Now that I've had time to reflect on it, I think it was fantastic, and I really want to go back and reread it again at some point. It was so good. Another book that I read that has stuck with me all year when I didn't think that it would was Back When We Were Grown-Ups by Ann Taylor. It's just a subtle, understated kind of book, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the main character and her journey and her story. I don't know what it was about it that really drew me into the story, because the story itself was great, but it wasn't something that was unrealistic or anything. But I don't know, I just connected with that main character so much that I had to include that on my list. Another one that was one of my favorites was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I loved that book, but it was not like the healthiest book to read. The poor main character, there was a lot of abuse of her, and she was a very, what I think, mentally ill person. But it was fascinating to read. It was so fast-paced, and I got a lot out of that book, so it's definitely one that I recommend. I also recommend, if you're in for a horror type read, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. That is like an exorcist type book. There's a little bit more to it than that, but I don't want to give anything away. Very good though. And then one of my last ones was The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I absolutely adored that book. I can't wait to get my own copy. It's been on my Amazon wish list forever, so hopefully this year I will make my way into purchasing that one. Now the last section of favorite books that I want to get to before I get to my favorite adult book of the year is series. 2 series that I do not own that I read this year that I absolutely fell in love with were, one was the Live Ship Traders Trilogy by Robin Hobb. It was my first go around with Robin Hobb, and I am so glad that I read her books because they were fantastic. I cannot wait to read more in 2017. The second series that I just fell so much in love with was the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, the first one being called The Black Prism. Those books were fantastic. They are on my Amazon wish list as well, and I cannot wait to purchase them because they were so good. I've not read the 4th one, so I don't know how that series ends up, but I can't wait to find out because it was so good. Another series that I started to reread this year, I got 4 books into, and I'm hoping to finish the rest in 2017, was the Dark Tower series. I read these first 4 books, them being The Gunslinger, The Drawing of Three, The Wastelands, and Wizard and Glass. Like I said, these are the first 4 books of his Dark Tower series. I had read them when I was about 19 years old. Now, again, rereading them at 32, I've gotten so much more out of them, and I fell in love. I didn't like The Gunslinger the first time I read it. I love it now. It's maybe one of my favorite books out of this whole series. I'm really excited to get to the rest in 2017, but if you have not tried Stephen King's go at fantasy, you definitely should. They're really good. And now for my favorite adult book that I read in 2016 is Little Bee by Chris Cleave. This story, again, was one that when I read it was really good, and I really loved it. But as the year has gone on, because I read this again at the beginning of 2016, it has stuck with me so much, and I want to reread it. Me wanting to reread it shows how much I loved it, because there's not many books that I'd want to dedicate that much time to rereading, and this is definitely one of them. Plus, this cover is just stunning. I absolutely love it. So if you have never read this, I highly, highly recommend it. It is an emotional story and one that you will just never forget. So those are my favorite adult books of 2016. What were some of yours? I would really love to hear them. Just put those down in the comments below. I hope you guys have a great week and happy reading.